Good afternoon. On behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it is my privilege to welcome you to the Nonprofit Empowerment Webinar Series. This is episode 117. Sounds like a lucky number to me. Let me introduce the coaches: Marv LeRoy, Mike Buckley, Chris Downing, and Rich Talmo. Mike is the Northeast Regional Coach, and he is in Albany. What's the weather like in Albany today?
Seasonally appropriate, unfortunately.
Okay.
Chilly, rainy, and cold.
Okay, Chris Downing is the Midwest Regional Coach. You're in Bloomington, was it?
Yes, Bloomington, Illinois.
What's the weather like?
We are sunny and 45 today, with a bit of wind.
Okay. And Rich Talmo is in Chico, California, I know, which is in Northern California. Rich, what type of weather do you have?
We're 71 degrees and sunny, so spring is hit really hard here.
Okay.
Yeah. Last a little bit longer than normal.
We got a coach from Father Molina. Did you get that? Let's make sure. Finally, Marv, I don't know if you're up north or down south. Where does the globe find you today?
Yeah, I'm in New York today, upstate New York, but
Okay.
just came back from Florida.
What's the weather like?
Same as what Mike described here. I left the 88 and sunny in Florida when I came back north, but that's okay. It's going to get warmer here.
Okay, here's our opening, I call this our opening biographical question. I could spend the next hour reading about all the accomplishments of this, my very esteemed colleagues here, but I have a surprise question for them, and we're going to start in alphabetical order. So that's Mr. Buckley. Mike, if I was to electronically transfer $1 billion to you during the next hour, my question is, what dinner would you have to celebrate that $1 billion with?
What particular meal would I have?
Yeah, what would you have for that dinner?
So my brother owns an Italian restaurant, even though we are Irish. But
Yeah.
I think the particular pasta meal is my solid go-to, actually, the lasagna. So that would be my meal, because he'd also have to buy it for me. So,
by the way, is it a meat or vegetable? What type of lasagna?
It's meat lasagna.
Okay. Let's go to Chris. I electronically transfer $1 billion to you. Okay.
Sure. Born and bred as a Midwesterner, it is a steak and potato dinner. A very nice.
Okay. What type
New
of
York
steak?
strip.
What type of steak?
I would probably say New York strip, well marbled.
Yeah.
Just good seasoning there, probably in that 10 to 12 ounce range. Fully loaded baked potato, nice salad, and a little slice of apple pie. Like I said, it's
Okay.
all the way down to the genetic core Midwest.
Okay. Rich, we're shifting to the West Coast. You get $1 billion in your bank account. Well, how would you celebrate? What type of meal would you celebrate with?
Well, I'd go to my favorite restaurant in San Francisco, a place called Soldini's, and I would get the rack of lamb with pasta and pesto, and probably a nice Cabernet to go along with it.
I don't know. I can't remember the last time I had lamb. Let's go to Randa and get a millennial perspective. Randa, we wire $1 billion into your bank account. You and your husband and your 7-year-old go out to celebrate. What are you guys eating?
Oh boy. I think that we're heading actually to, the finest place we can get organic produce, and we're going to home make some salsa and do homemade Tex-Mex that night. I think that's more our jam.
That's very interesting. Okay, Marv, and I know Marv and I have had a lot of meals together. Usually I go for McDonald's. Usually he goes for Ruth Chris. But what would be your $1 billion celebration meal?
I'm somebody who has ice cream every day, and I had this tradition from long ago when I started out in fundraising. when we secured a gift, whatever size it was, we didn't talk about billions too often back in the 80s, but
Yeah.
I always went out and had a chocolate milkshake. That was my
Ah,
thing that I celebrated with. So I'd probably have a chocolate milkshake.
ah, ah, ah. Well, we don't have to wire you $1 billion for that, right?
Yeah, I could probably do with a little less.
Okay, team, let me see. We're going to rotate this around and we'll start in alphabetical order and then we'll do it in reverse alphabetical order. And then we're giving Marv the opportunity to chime in or not chime in. Okay. I have several questions. Around question 7, Randa, I'd like you to ask the millennial questions, or if you're ever moved. I mean, again, the audience, if you hear something that you need clarification, that prompts another question, again, type it in the chat space, the Q&A box. Better yet, raise your hand. Okay, let's start with Dr. Buckley, okay? We all know that donors are in the difficult position of having to choose not between the good and the bad, between the good and the good. So how do you make a project really stand out and distinctive from all the other good causes?
Well, I think, and Jim, thanks for having me and everyone on the team. I think it really comes down to effectively marketing and communicating what it is that the project will do. In my experience working with some smaller to medium-sized nonprofit organizations, the truth of the matter is that their donor pool is their donor pool, and going outside their donor pool, and chasing, with all due respect to Mackenzie Scott Bezos, chasing that money is not going to return as good an ROI as looking at your current donor pool. So I think really messaging what it is the project will do. It's not about the actual capital project. It's not about the building. It's not about the endowment. It's about what change will occur because of that item or that thing.
Okay. Okay, next in alphabetical order. And again, we realize probably the later you go in the order, it's going to get tougher. But Chris, how do you make your project stand out in a sea of good causes?
I think it's stories, being able to tell your story in an effective way that people can remember. People don't necessarily remember statistics, but they remember a story. And if you have one that is captivating, that gets to the heart of what's occurring, and is something that a person can take away, because the great part that you have there is not only do they remember your charity, but they're then likely to share that story with somebody else. It's part of the basic human condition. It's how we've been as a species since the beginning of time, and it continues to be that you won't remember the numbers, you remember the story and how that story made you feel. So focusing on that.
Okay. Rich, again, how do you make your project stand out when people are not choosing between the good and the bad, but they're choosing between the good and the good?
So, Jim, again, thank you for having me in this podcast. Getting your project to stand out, I think, is best served by having people that have been engaged with the project that have benefited from it, and having those notable quotables in the community to tell your story as opposed to you trying to tell it yourself. I always found to be more effective in getting people to listen, because friends give to friends, people give to people, and the more people you have engaged with that good story in the community, I think more successful transitions happen.
I appreciate you all. It was not easy. You all brought different perspectives, and not to put pressure, Marv, as we go around the table, you can add or not add comments at your discretion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of had a sense where most of the gang would go, because we've had great conversations, and they have, while we're all generalists at some level, everybody has areas that they're specialist in and really spend a good bit of their background and their careers. And I think that came out in the comments. There's so many different dimensions and how people can be engaged and be a part of special campaigns. I think it's important on the front end to maybe define capital campaign a little bit, because
wait a minute, Marv. Thank you. You want to know That's on me. I was going to add, thank you. I said, Marv, I want you to start by defining capital campaign. So an error to Eskin, and please, for our audience, how do you define capital campaign?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think years and years ago, when you said capital campaign, everybody just assumed there was a building component. There was they didn't really see the word capital being capital as in dollars to have available to do special things, whether they were build bricks and mortar or programmatic things. Does it include endowment? We usually talk in terms of comprehensive campaigns, because most of us include the annual fund in the campaign on the one end and something in the world of plan giving on the other, whether it's growing endowment or reserve funds or whatever. But it's really just a campaign, and many people use campaign in the term annual fund campaign, which becomes even more confusing. But we really try to integrate all of these things into the campaign model. I will say what defines a campaign, comprehensive, annual, or capital, or otherwise, is that it is a transformational moment.
Yeah.
It's something out of the ordinary than just going and grinding it out each year and building your operating funds. It helps you do something uniquely special for your organization. It takes you to a place you've not been before. So I really think it's more a mindset than the way you present yourself. I mean, there's thematic presentations and there's messaging, and it's a very organized commitment of time and energies and people. But the true essence of a campaign is you want to go to another place. You want to transform your organization to something else.
Hey, Marv, thank you for defining a campaign. I was supposed to ask you that question. Okay, let's reverse the order if I have it correct, and we'll go to Chico, California. I love the name. Is that CHICO, or how's Chico spelled?
That's it, CHICO.
Okay.
We're a nice college community.
Okay. Rich, what are the most essential ingredients for success for a capital campaign of any type? Is strong leadership. Can you tell us how nonprofits can recruit a strong campaign chair and strong campaign committee members who will set the pace, for the giving and getting of gifts?
Well, I think if you're starting fresh and you don't necessarily have that kind of leadership within your circles, then probably most important, you need to understand your community and where the leadership lies.
Yeah.
And you need to both have the courage and knowledge of how important your cause is to the community. And you have to go out one by one and meet with them if you can get on their calendars and let them know what you're doing, what you're trying to do. And you got to do it over and over again until you find the right people. Now, if you find the right person, that's like a pebble in a pond that could lead to a lot of different social circles. And so you got to be in your community, you got to know your community, and you have to have the courage to embrace the leaders and be with them.
And wouldn't you agree? I always think it's quality over quantity. It's amazing how much you can move the earth with, say, 5 to 7 of the right people, as opposed to a collection of 20 people.
Well, 5 to 7 could get you multiples of their circles and their friends. So, of course.
So let's go talk about recruiting leadership and move to Chris.
I think as you're doing it, I'm going to keep coming back to my theme of being able to tell a story. So as you're looking at those chairs, it's people who can articulate why they're passionate about it, not the talking points that you give them, but what's on their heart. So as they can either speak to how your organization changed their life, why they're passionate about it, why they choose to give. And the more genuine that is, the greater resonance that it has, that you'll find very quickly people can pick up on speaking points that they're trying to remember. But when they speak from the heart, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not fluid, the genuineness really cuts through in a way that the best marketing campaign never will. So finding those people who are really passionate about what you're doing, they don't have to be your largest financial givers, but
Yeah.
they need to be the ones that can sing your praises in their own words the best.
Okay, let's go to Mike. Mike, sometimes getting people's time is just as challenging as getting their money because, you know, you can replace money, you can never replace time. What's your perspective on recruiting leadership?
Yeah, I think to jump off of what Chris said, I think the call is coming from within your own house. So look and see who your donors are and do a real deep dive into who those people are. I have found with all the organizations I've worked with that, you know, after a while you sort of get used to just seeing the same names and no one's done a real deep dive or connected with them in, you know, in an intentional one-on-one way. So I think you start by having somebody, you know, like an external consultant look at your top 400 donor list or whatever that number is for your organization and really start to identify who those people are. And to what Chris said, they don't have to be the richest people in the room. You know, they don't have to be the people that are at all the, you know, galas locally, but they are people who have to be able to speak eloquently and really make that connection with donors in order to lead the campaign.
For clarification, there's nothing wrong to having very wealthy people on your campaign committee. Let's see. Let's go. I guess we're going to start with Mike again. What type of research do you like perform to indicate that a capital campaign goal can be achieved?
I think a feasibility study is an important part of.
Can you explain to our audience what is a feasibility study?
Basically the definition is in the name. It's a scientific, quasi-scientific, I guess, way of assessing whether or not your donors are excited about your organization, if they are connecting, if they are willing to connect their resources to your passion. And it really, I think, gives you a real objective view of what people think about your organization, and in particular, its leadership. So I think a feasibility study is a great way to start, but also, again, having somebody from the outside come in and look and even ask about the mechanics. I mean, as Marv said, a lot of the work that the Institute does is with small and medium-sized nonprofit organizations who oftentimes, maybe often is being a little bit too unkind, but who oftentimes don't really have the mechanics in place to do an effective annual campaign, let alone a capital campaign. So there is significant value in having an external person come in and just ask a lot of good questions internally about your organization, and then think about doing a feasibility study for the folks external to your organization.
Right. Hey, Chris, what to you indicates readiness to take on a first capital campaign?
I think readiness is making sure that you have a clear vision of what you're trying to accomplish. That you shouldn't do a campaign for the sake of a campaign. It's not about hoarding money or piling it up, but that you have a very clear either objective, issue, thing that you're trying to solve. Because if you don't have that, if you're just doing it because you've seen other people do it around you, or because you just think, hey, this is a good time, it's not going to go well, because you're not going to have that very clear vision, very clear story to tell of this is what we're trying to accomplish. So making sure that that's well defined before you're even talking to donor one or even feasibility study one.
Okay, Rich, you're last here. What indicates capital campaign readiness to you in the projects that you've worked on?
Well, you know, and I've been associated with several feasibility studies, and sometimes they come back and they say you're not ready. But the great thing about a feasibility study is it gives you a roadmap to readiness. And so beyond that, institutional readiness is, do you have the right people in place? Is your senior development staff senior development? Is your board ready? And sometimes you have to be brave enough to say, no, we're not ready. That we're not going to do a campaign for the sake of a campaign. And, you know, sometimes it takes a year or two to actually get your organization ready for that kind of a process.
Exactly.
Jim, let me just chime in
Yeah,
here.
Marv.
There's actually another step. All of the comments around feasibility studies were spot on, but sometimes organizations need to do an internal study. And we refer to that as a development assessment or a strategic positioning process where you try to get your house in order before you take it to the public. And I think feasibility studies are enhanced in the likelihood of them being positive and leading to a campaign when you present yourself in the best possible way. So sometimes stepping back, we often do kind of a hybrid where you'll do a little bit of both of those things. And to relate back to the question before about leadership, some of the great leaders that we've been able to recruit into organizations, both for campaigns and boards and other things, came out of that process. They really get a sense of who you are. They get a chance to kind of look under the hood, see if you're strong enough and of stature enough for them. And I think all those things are very valuable in how we bring the best and brightest from the communities into our organizations. And I will say I think we lose more people in the recruitment process to bring them onto boards or campaign committees by going too small or going.
Okay,
not.
what do you mean? What do you mean by that?
I remember we went to I won't reveal the organization or the community, but we went to the person in the community where you kind of had to kiss the ring and get permission to do a campaign. It was a leader in the community.
Yeah.
And I remember like it was yesterday. We had a good conversation. He was very impressed with what he heard. And then we announced that it was a $2 million campaign. And he said, come back to me when you guys are serious. I raised that at cocktail parties on the weekend. So you really have to measure the person you're going to talk with before you go have that conversation. And it was a good message to them because I was trying to convince them that they were going too small, that they should push that envelope a little bit. You can't do campaigns and you can't keep doing them like dominoes. You got to pick your time and your moment. And when you do one and complete it, you got to put a little time between them. So you don't want to leave things on the table. And especially the smaller organizations tend to think small sometimes because that's where they feel their sweet spot is. Jim, you've heard me say this before. And when I do presentations to these organizations, and I used to do this all the time with community colleges, they've done so much for so many, so well, so long with so little, they've never thought to do it differently. And what campaigns do is they give you permission to dream.
I heard that so long ago. I had a different color hair when I first heard you say it, and you're so true. Hey, let's see, John, if we can bring in a member of our learning community. Is Marjorie Hope available? We'd like to bring her on camera for 2 minutes. And Marjorie, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay. How are you doing? She's in Boca Raton. What's the weather like in Boca?
It's cool today. It's actually really nice in the 70s, and we're going to be getting rain in the day or two, but it's pretty nice right now.
By the way, congratulations on your Amazon best-selling book, Connect Diplomacy. And you have personally visited 12 countries. You've studied close to all 200 of them on the planet. Take a minute or two to just explain anything that really leaps out of you of how fundraising is different around the world.
There we go. Now it's on. So around the world, it is very different. In emerging economies and developing fundraising methods, it differs from factors as limited access to financial resources, cultural norms surrounding what's going on, charitable giving. Across the globe, fundraising efforts are increasing, leveraging now because of technology. So they are getting wider audiences and streamlining donation process, like online fundraising platforms of social media campaigns. Payment solutions have been easier now. They're revolutionizing the way money is raised. Cryptocurrency like Bitcoin is making it much, much easier now. In fact, somebody was just telling me today that they are actually raising money on Bitcoin through an app called, I forget the app they were telling me now, but you can do this around the world now. They don't need anything, and it's much more efficient to collect donations. the countries that raise the most money are interesting. It depends on the size of their economy, the strength of their nonprofit sector, and the cultural attitudes towards charity, and towards the giving. Obviously, United States is one of the biggest.
Yeah.
China,
Yeah.
Japan.
Yeah.
They tend to raise the most significant amounts of money due to their sheer size.
Does the
and
Middle East
population.
rank real high? How about the Middle East?
Not as high, but I really expect all of that to change very shortly now with the advantage now that we have of the cryptocurrency. You see, you have to remember, years ago, even just recently, if you're in Africa, you may not even have a bank account.
Yeah.
With cryptocurrency, you don't need a bank account. You can trade money back and forth. You can give money. You can do whatever you want.
Marjorie, thank you very much. And by the way, talking about that the world's getting smaller and smaller, I'm going to put a plug in. Our next webinar on April 3rd is one of the grand masters of both teaching and practicing fundraising from London, Bernard Ross. And it's 5 hours later. Rich, remember we were trying to coordinate time zones. It's going to be 9 to 10 in London, and we're going to have a specific show dedicated to comparing and contrasting US and UK fundraising. Let's go to my millennial side of the brain. And Randa, I think you got a few questions for our esteemed panel.
Yeah, I do. So I would like to ask for any of you really, but when I was raising money for opera here in Texas, I often encountered situations where I felt like what was expected of me differed from who I am. So how might you advise a millennial fundraiser like me to navigate and kind of leverage their perspective and values when engaging with donors who might have some different generational or gender-related expectations?
Why don't we start? I guess let's go back and go alphabetical. We'll start with Mike.
I was afraid that was going to happen.
Well, you're the youngest of the rest of the group, so
yeah, that's a real good question. So the advice that I give to people is, I've been doing this my entire professional career, which is more than half my life. And in that span, and again, Mark, thanks for pointing out the second youngest, so everyone's older than me, which is fine. But I think that we would all agree that there's technology that comes in, we're talking about Bitcoin. Having an online giving page was like a revolution when I was, the associate director of the annual fund at a small private college. But what has never changed and will never change is, to Chris's point earlier, storytelling and individuals making those connections. Yeah. So I think too much, and I'm probably going to tell a secret that we don't want anyone else to know. What we do is not rocket science. We're in the relationship business. So regardless of who you are, what you do, who you identify with, what your age is, making those genuine connections with people one-on-one is really important. And sometimes you're not the right person. So we talk about having the right person in the right place at the right time, asking for the right amount of money. I think so often we find, we want it to be us, and sometimes it's not us for whatever reason, and that's okay to punt it over to a colleague.
Yeah. As a development professional, sometimes your success is not measured in what you do, but is what you can get, your people above you and board members, what you can get them to do. Let's go to Chris on the millennial question.
I guess my advice would be is that you always want the donor to be telling their story to you. So it is each time as you come in, it's not so much you selling the organization, but if you in the first half to 2/3 of the conversation can make it 80% about the donor. So asking them their backstory, having them tell, what their perspective is and going for that part of it. And then just being that good listener and then finding connection points. So that remember, it's not you that the person's giving money to, it's your organization. And so you're letting them tell their story, you're letting them tell their background, why they care, or even maybe why they don't know anything about it. And then you're coming back and you're attaching hey, I heard you say this. Did you know our organization shares that same value? Or you talked about these three things. I know, I'm not sure if you're aware, we really care about those too. And so it's being a good listener. And so I don't know if it necessarily matters what generation you come from. It's getting the other person to do most of the talking, and you're just listening, and at the very tail end, making those connection points through.
Okay,
Yeah.
Rich, you're in the difficult position of going last on this question. So go ahead.
Well, I think both Chris and Mike make really great points, being a good listener and, trying to find connections. And probably the last thing I would add is with the people that are senior in your organization or with board members that are senior in your organization, do role playing with them. Talk with them about how you want to approach a particular donor and listen to what their response is going to be. The real good fundraisers are patient people that are good listeners and can connect the dots. And sometimes younger people aren't patient, they're not good listeners, and they don't connect the dots easily. So that's the only
Except
thing.
for Randa. Randa's an exception.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's also important to remember that when we are meeting with individuals as fundraisers and leaders of campaign projects, we often go in tandem or maybe as many as three people. So you have a chance to and Mike alluded to this, the right people or right person. Sometimes it's the right people. Have somebody in the group that probably will connect, a little bit better with the person you're meeting with. That can be age, it can be gender, it can be all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So pay attention to that when you're putting your team together to go in and have those early conversations. But this is a perfect example of that old adage in fundraising: if you want my money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. You can ask anybody for their opinion, and 99.9% of Americans will be happy to give you their opinion on anything you want.
And then some.
I want to just one quick thing on Margie's comment, because the idea that philanthropy is still pretty uniquely American. There are very few countries in the world that, everybody who has religious organizations, there's a lot of money that changes hands that is philanthropic. But pure philanthropy is still pretty much an American tradition. That's why a lot of the money's being raised for NGOs, nonprofits in other countries, is raised in the United States. We have 3 projects and have had a couple other projects over the years that are with organizations that have international causes where the money goes to provide care and service to individuals, but is raised here through American dollars. And the whole issue of cryptocurrency, we're not even going there. That's a whole other conversation. And you can count the number of crypto dollars into charities probably on these 2 hands. Cryptocurrency is not used in the world of charity yet in any significant way.
Yeah. Thank you. How about another millennial question, Randa?
Sure. This one I've just encountered a lot recently is that funders seem pretty adamant that our leadership must reflect the communities we serve. It makes sense. But could you speak to your experiences in fostering some diversity and inclusivity on the campaign chairing committee or the whole team to reflect those communities?
Let's start with Rich on this one.
That's an interesting question. When I left Palomar College, I took an assignment with a community clinic. And, the federal rules with the community clinic is 50% of the board has to be from the community, and they have to be users of the clinic services. And so with that, me being the big time fundraiser, my decision was, let's start a president's association. Let's get $1,000 donors, and let's start to bring them into the fold. Let's start to bring people in that have ways and means that can support the organization. And it did create quite a bit of discomfort for the senior leadership, because all of a sudden we had very wealthy people coming to cocktail receptions, coming to board meetings, us trying to recruit that other 50%. So, the difficulty is in being patient and being understanding of those cultural differences. But without the power of money in a community, it's really hard to push, the envelope to raise the kind of money that you want to raise. So it was a very difficult time in my 3-year association with the clinic. But we did some good things, but I don't think it was fully appreciated.
Chris?
Yeah, I think this is a great point that, of course, donors want to see and have that expectation. But what it really is that it gives you permission to have conversations with audiences that you may have not approached before, and are able to bring that to the limelight for them. So as you do that, as we talk about, hey, you heard both Rich and Marv talk before about circles of giving, that if you can get one person on your committee, they then reach into their community. And as you then look to diversify your particular group, what you'll then find is if you only focus on your ultra wealthy, it is such a inclusive, and they just basically know each other. And so it's this very small pocket. But if you choose to reach out and bring people to the table who maybe have never been at the table before, they're going to be excited to be there. They're going to give you perspectives that you haven't necessarily heard before. And they're going to go to audiences that maybe no one's ever reached to, because everyone's been racing after these 15, 20, 50, 100 people in your community. So taking that opportunity.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make sure that you have diversity involved in your campaign effort, and that it is truly reflective of your actual community, not just your donor community. I think that we all know people, different people give in different ways and are excited and motivated differently. So the more folks that you can have that represent that external viewpoint, or those various different viewpoints, I think is very important. But the biggest mistake I've seen organizations make is adding diversity for the sake of diversity and then not really embracing that diversity. So, if you are going to go out and recruit folks, who are reflective of your community and want to be involved, you have to make sure that when they're giving you their advice, as Marv said before, you're actually listening to it.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hey, Marv?
Thank you.
I went 10 years of doing campaign projects as a consultant and didn't have a woman chair or leader of a campaign. Took a decade of mine, and I am the person who promotes that and champions it. And it was really a struggle to bring enough gender diversity to these organizations, and then to see them ascend. And I think the first woman I had as a chair was when Chris and I did his first campaign together.
Yeah.
We had co-chairs and had a woman involved, so it was great.
And by the way, just I want to point out, we all came through the Association of Fundraising Professionals. Their membership rank, which is I think about 31,000 members, it's 70% female now. 70%, and Randa's one of them. Randa, we'll give you one more question because you're doing pretty good.
Okay, good. I'm glad we have time. Thank you. So in today's digital age, I wanted to ask you, I know that data and insights play a really significant role in decision making. How have you leveraged research and analytics to assess the feasibility of your campaign goal and tailor your fundraising strategy to resonate with donors, including younger generations who may have different giving preferences?
Okay, Mike, that's a tough one, so we'll start with you.
You're starting with the right guy, though. He's our analytics guy.
I mean, it's getting, unfortunately, I think it is getting harder and harder to figure out what people really have, or the success of something based upon just the data out there. Folks are hiding their wealth. We are making assumptions about people based on appearances. And so it really is hard to use data as your first line of defense. For me, it's more about a gut check. I've been doing this for a while. Every single person on this call can walk into a room with a major donor, and within 20 minutes, you're going to know whether or not it's going to go the way you want it to do. So data is really hard. It's getting harder and harder. People are hiding their wealth. And you can analyze it. You can think about, if so-and-so gave 10% more and all that. But at the end of the day, if you don't do a good job sitting down with that person and asking them for money, you're pretty much out of luck.
You know, I love surprises. Until a month ago, how many people had heard of Dr. Ruth Gottsman? And then she gives $1 billion to the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. Okay, I think her largest gift up to that point wasn't the chicken, wasn't chopped liver, it was 25 million, but $1 billion gift. I mean, that's a small circle. So let me see the rotation.
I always
Marv.
bat in the middle, so I'm happy to do so, Jim.
Okay, Chris.
I'm
Okay, thank you.
perfectly in between Rich and Mike. It's you always go between the true champs, and you can hide right
Okay.
there. My answer is a little bit of what Mike hinted at within his. Whereas a previous way of looking at data was trying to figure out a person's wealth. I think the new one is a profiling, and I say that in a positive way. That if you need to look at your donors and say, oh, hey, we're noticing a trend of that a good number of our donors are, so I work at community college, our community college graduates, not necessarily of ours, are 40 to 55 years old and are left-handed. I'm randomly picking three.
Hooray for the left-handers.
Yes. And then I would push into my database and say, hey, or try to do a screening that way and go, yeah, I've noticed that Rich meets these three. He's only given us $5 a few times, but because he meets this profile, there's a chance he'll step through that. And so coming towards those people that fit a profile that's not so much based on actual wealth, but on other common factors that you'll notice between. And so that's what data can start to do for you. And I think, you know, for us, and it was, as Mike pointed out there, and that was a conversation, I don't know if he remembers it, it was on a call that Marv had where they started to look at trends of giving within the annual campaign and then began to specialize campaign parts within it for certain audiences, that not everyone is the exact same, that you can start to specialize, and your data allows you to do that. So instead of running one big campaign, you're starting to segment your populations better. And that's what data allows you to do, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Marv.
Well, certainly target messaging is enhanced when you have good data, and you don't always have to have the one universal message. You can really hone in on what people might resonate at a stronger level for. There's no question with the technologies we have now, there's more data available than ever in our history. And the people on the screen have done a great job for their organizations and for the clients that they've done projects with for us. Taking advantage of that. I mean, they're well screened. You get all kinds of data and all kinds of data. But I'm still like everybody here on the screen who said this already. Until I have it confirmed by a body sitting at the table, I don't believe it. I mean, I'll take it as it's an instigator, and it makes us look closer at them. But I want local confirmation. It's like playing the local private golf club. Local knowledge is the thing that matters. The other thing is, I think people still use data to talk themselves out of raising money more than they use it to talk themselves into it.
Study things to death.
Yeah. You can, if you look at it, you can still, every meeting you go to, you say, I want you to drill down deeper. And there's always probably another place to go. But at some point, it's time to ask. It's time to invite people to do something special for your campaign or your organization. So I think those are important lessons for us.
Yeah. Hey, I hope no one's insulted by this, but this has been such a very rich conversation. We're in the last 10 minutes, but I know every day I read about artificial intelligence, but during this 50 minutes, I still prefer human intelligence, and nothing beats. Everybody at this table has been there, done that. Okay. And, it was the old question. You want to know something about the car, ask the person who drives one. We're running out of time. I've heard the word storytelling as much as anything, and I've completely forgotten who to start with. So I think I'm going to start with Mike again, whether that's right or wrong. Technology gives us so many different ways to tell stories, and some are very cost effective. That's the upside. With all the different ways to tell your story, what do you see your pro and cons of different methods?
We talked about Jerry Panis, I think, before we started this, officially started this conversation, and his book, Asking, the 59-minute guide to everything. Was it board members, volunteers, and staff need to know to secure the gift. And while it's probably no longer politically correct to quote this particular quote out of that book, Jerry had a paragraph in that book about how the only way to milk a cow is to go sit down and milk a cow. And while certainly you can't call it, you can't email it, you can't, send it a letter, you have to actually go and
robot
sit down
to milk the cow?
I mean, you probably could, but you're not going to get to know, and Jim, thanks for asking that question because you're teeing me up perfectly. You're not going to get to know the cow as well as you would.
Yeah.
So I think in this day and age when technology like this is great and we're able to all be in different corners of the country, I'm hearing more and more nonprofit organizations talk about how their major gift officers don't need to travel anymore, and that's just wrong. So make sure that you're meeting with donors one-on-one.
Yeah. Chris?
Grandson of a dairy farmer, Mike. That was a fantastic answer there. You also learn not only that part of it, but what kind of mood that you need to be in. And so making sure that you're coming from a place of both listening, but telling that genuine story to the person, and make sure it's something that you believe in and finding your part within it. That there are things that you can talk about, but you as a fundraiser in and of itself, whether it's you the fundraiser or you the board member, is making sure that really at your core you can say, hey, this is what I believe in, this is the job that I'm doing, this is why I want to be here, and that hopefully comes through. That there are organizations that again, as I'm sure that Rich and Mike and Rhonda and Marv here, there are certain organizations I'm sure I could never work for. The organization that wants to shoot puppies into the sun, I had to pass no matter how nice their contract was. That's just not what I believe in. But coming back to the ones that you do and knowing why you do and making sure that you can constantly articulate that. And the great part that you can do is sometimes is not even telling your story, but going to the people that you're helping, asking them for their stories and making sure that you can share that through, that you can be their voice at the table, that it might not be that they can be in that meeting with you, but you can talk for, whether it's the student going to your college, whether it's the person who's coming to your healthcare clinic, whether it's the survivor of the disease you're trying to defeat. Tell their stories and make it even more about them. So,
Hey, Rich.
I think that technology is kind of pulling people away from the actual personal contact. And like Mike and Chris have shared, we at Menlo College a while back, before the internet, we decided to do a campaign to name the business school. And we realized that the students that went to the business school were from Hawaii and Asia, and they had the longest relationship with the dean of the school. And so multiple trips into Asia and Hawaii, and we were able to raise over $1 million in a commitment to endow the chair. Now, that personal contact, I think people kind of hide behind emails, and they hide behind beautiful brochures, but until you get in front of somebody and really tell the story, you don't get the full sense of it. And I've raised 100,000 with text messages. But it's because the donors knew me and they knew why I was contacting them, and they had a personal relationship with me. So younger donors coming up have to understand that it's personal relationships people give to people.
Marv, I know where you stand on this one, so I'm going to stand off for a second, but I'd like to get a millennial perspective. Randa, what's your perspective on telling stories? What do millennials want?
I knew. I think I can't speak for everybody, but I think millennials really like the personalized touch. I think the relationships still matter. I know that we're part of this generation that has really led the charge, I think, on working together virtually. And I'm all for it. I love Zoom meetings, but even with other millennials that I work with, everybody still seems to prefer some kind of direct personal touch. You know, if it's not possible, you know, if you're working nationally or internationally, it's not always possible to get together in person as quick as you want to. But doing something to give a personal touch, a direct approach, is always more appreciated. I've even heard of people, you know, really appreciating getting the thank you notes in the mail still instead of the dang emails over and over and over. You know, and some people, Rich, really do. They just want a text message. They've met you a few times. They don't care anymore. They just want the text. Ask me, make the ask. But some people, you know, you really have to gauge it person by person. And it's getting more and more difficult.
Guess what,
and complicated.
Marv? You're going to get the last word, John. Can you put Marv's contact information? And I have a question ready for Marv. Marv, I just read a benchmark study that 37% of the 1.5 million nonprofits in the nation are considering conducting their first campaign. They haven't done a campaign before. Can you advise them? They're thinking about it. They just can't pull the trigger. How can the Institute for Philanthropic Excellence partner with them?
Well, I think a lot of what's driving the newer organizations in the campaign realm is coming out of the pandemic. Budgets were busted, reserve funds were used up. People have now begun to understand the value, a heightened value for endowment to give you protection in future years. So I think it's good that for whatever reason people have come to this awareness that it's in their best interest. We all need transformational moments. You know, the thing that I always hear from nonprofits at every size is we wish we could do more. Well, our tagline for the Institute is more money, more mission. And it was as direct today, you know, 15 years ago as it is today. You want to do more, we can help you get the resources to do that. The other thing is we've touched on a nice assortment of issues. For the things that people didn't hear that they were hoping to hear, go to our website at moremission.com. There are white papers under resources. Many of the people on the screen here have contributed to that body of knowledge. And read more about what's out there. We have services, whatever you need.
It's safe to say that if they are sitting on the fence and they want to get a third-party perspective, that they are welcome to either phone you or email you or send you a smoke signal. And you have seasoned coaches like Chris, like Mike, like Rich, like Randa all over the country to give them whatever power they need.
Right.
I think this has been one of the most captivating sessions we've had. I want to thank all our experts. And we're at the 5 o'clock hour. Let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to put a very short summary on LinkedIn and Facebook, 5 main points and takeaways. And then John Largent, thank you, as producer. I says he does an overnight spin dry of this recording. He edits it, and sometime probably in the early morning, sometime between 9 and 10 a.m., we are going to post a recording of this past hour. And by the way, the truth is many more people are going to watch this on demand than join us live. But I do want to thank our learning community because they are made up of our heroes, the executive directors, the CEOs, the directors of development, the board chairs, the board members, the volunteers, and the donors. And every day you're doing something to touch, improve, and save more lives. And again, to our panel, sometimes I was wondering how we're going to balance all this, but we did. So thank you very much for the leadership that you all provide to the nonprofit sector. And we're going across the big pond on April 3rd, and we're going to have a special guest from London. So the world gets smaller. And so with that, thank you to everyone and be well.